What happened in Pope County has stunned Arkansas and has rocked the nation. A mass murder of almost unbelievable proportions. 16 dead, including 14 who may be members of the same family. It all started yesterday with a shooting spree in Russellville that left 2 people dead and 4 people wounded. Then last night, police discovered 5 bodies inside a home in Dover. And today, the grisly recovery of 9 more bodies.
There it is.
Emotionally, fellas, you never get used to it. You never get used to it.
Between December 22nd and 28th, 1987, the Simmons family home, already filled with tension, became the site of an unthinkable nightmare. What should have been a week of festive joy became a blood-soaked Christmas horror. Armed with a .22 caliber pistol, Ronald Gene Simmons methodically executed his family, carrying out one of the deadliest massacres in American history. One by one, he hunted down his wife, children, and grandchildren, leaving no one spared. And as the bodies piled up inside his home, Ronald wasn't finished. He had more blood to spill, more revenge to take. But why? What could drive a father to slaughter his entire family in cold blood? And how did a man capable of such horrific brutality manage to go unnoticed until it was far too late? The truth behind this massacre is more disturbing than you can imagine. Stay with me as we uncover the shocking details of this case, the psychology of a mass murderer, and the devastation that followed. Welcome to Crime Aura, where the darkest true crime stories come to life. We bring you gripping stories every week, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. Now, let's dive into today's story. Before he became the mastermind of one of America's deadliest massacres, Ronald Gene Simmons was just another boy, struggling to find his place in the world. But from an early age, the signs of a troubled mind were already there. Born on July 15, 1940, in Chicago, Illinois, Ronald's life took a tragic turn before he was even old enough to understand it. When he was just 3 years old, his father, William Simmons, passed away, leaving his mother, Loretta, to raise him alone. But she wouldn't be alone for long. Just a year later, Loretta met another man, William Griffin, a civil engineer for the U.S. Army. In 1946, when Ronald was 6, Griffin's career took them from Illinois to Little Rock, Arkansas. And so began a cycle that would define Ronald's childhood. Constant upheaval, new towns, new schools, and a growing sense of isolation. Each time Ronald adjusted to a new neighborhood, it was time to leave again. He watched other kids form friendships he knew he'd never keep. The more they moved, the more he withdrew. The lack of stability left him without roots, without belonging. On December 15, 1957, at just 17 years old, Ronald made a life-altering decision. He dropped out of high school and enlisted in the U.S. Navy. His parents believed the military would break him, forcing him to obey the strict discipline he had always rebelled against. But they were wrong. Instead of suffocating him, the Navy gave Ronald something he had never known: order. The rigid structure, the rules, the sense of purpose, it all fit together like pieces of a puzzle he didn't realize was missing. For the first time in his life, he had control over himself, his actions, and eventually over others. At 20 years old, while stationed in Washington, Ronald met Becky Ulibarri. She was young, sweet, and quickly fell for his charm. The two married on July 4th, 1960, in New Mexico. At first, it seemed like a love story, but behind closed doors, it was something else entirely. Becky wasn't just Ronald's wife, she was his possession. Every detail of her life, from the way she styled her hair to the words she spoke, had to meet his approval. There was no escape, no choice, only Ronald's rules. At first, Becky didn't recognize the subtle ways he tightened his grip. It started with small demands: how she should dress, what food she should cook, how she should respond when spoken to. Then came the restrictions. He didn't like her writing letters. He didn't like her speaking too much when they were out. Eventually, Becky wasn't allowed to receive mail at all. Phone calls were screened. Any attempt to reach out to her family was met with threats. Her family watched as Becky became a shell of the woman they once knew. She wasn't just controlled, she was dependent. Ronald's grip on Becky didn't loosen after they had children. It tightened. Their 7 children, 3 sons, Ronald Jr., Eddie, and Billy, and 4 daughters, Loretta, Marianne, Becky, and Sheila, grew up under his iron rule. From the outside, they looked like any ordinary family. But behind closed doors, the Simmons household was a dictatorship. Ronald controlled everything, when they ate, where they went, even how they spoke. The children learned quickly that disobedience or even hesitation led to swift and severe punishment. But physical punishment wasn't the worst of it. It was the psychological control that made Ronald truly terrifying. He didn't just want obedience, he wanted submission. He isolated his family, ensuring they had no outside influences. The children weren't allowed to have close friends.
Never seen anyone like him, you know. I know about everybody in Polk County, and I ain't never seen anyone weird as he is.
You never did know them, you know, you couldn't get to know them. They was quiet people.
In 1963, Ronald traded one rigid structure for another, leaving the Navy to join the Air Force. Military life suited him. Orders were followed without question. During his 2 decades of service, he thrived in the structured environment, earning commendations, including the prestigious Bronze Star Medal. To his superiors, he was a dedicated soldier, an efficient leader, a man who knew how to command respect. But what they didn't see, what his family saw every single day, was the man behind the uniform. Ronald saw the military as validation of his authority. In his mind, he wasn't just enforcing order, he was owed obedience. If the military rewarded strict discipline, why shouldn't his family do the same? And when the time came for him to retire in 1979, he took that mentality home with him. After retiring, Ronald moved his family to Cloudcroft, New Mexico, a tiny, isolated town with less than 800 people. A fresh start? Maybe for some. But for the Simmons family, isolation wasn't freedom. It was a prison. In Cloudcroft, there were fewer people to question him, fewer outside influences that could weaken his hold on Becky and the children. Neighbors barely saw the Simmons family. The children rarely played outside, and Becky was almost never seen alone. The house itself became a fortress. Ronald built high fences around the property, cutting off any view from the road. He reinforced the windows and doors, ensuring that no one got in or out without his permission. As the walls around them grew higher, so did the tension inside. For the first time since his youth, Ronald no longer had the rigid structure of the military to keep him in check. Without its rules and order, he began to unravel. He started drinking, not socially, not occasionally, but constantly. From the moment he woke up until he passed out, there was always a beer in his hand. Among all the children in the Simmons household, one stood apart from the rest. Ronald's 17-year-old daughter, Sheila, had always been his favorite, but in a way that made people uneasy. At first, it seemed like harmless favoritism. Ronald would praise her more than the others, keep her by his side whenever possible. But as Sheila grew older, his affection twisted into something else. People noticed. His acquaintances, even strangers, noticed. In public, Sheila and Ronald were too close. His hand would linger too long on her shoulder in a way that wasn't fatherly. They weren't behaving like father and daughter. It was something else. Sheila, who had spent her entire life trying to please her father, had no idea how deeply she had been trapped. Ronald had groomed her from childhood, ensuring that by the time she realized what was happening, it was too late to escape. And by 1980, Ronald crossed a line that should never be crossed. Ronald got his daughter Sheila pregnant. Sheila gave birth to a baby girl named Sylvia in June 1981. For Becky, the shame of what was happening inside her home was suffocating, but more than that, she was terrified. She had spent years enduring Ronald's control, and now their family's darkest secret was unraveling in the open. But while Becky remained paralyzed by fear, her eldest son, Ronald Gene Simmons Jr., refused to stay silent. In August 1981, he made a decision that would change everything. He walked into a police station and told the truth. Ronald Jr. reported his father for incest. He told them that his own 17-year-old sister, Sheila, had given birth to a child, and their father was the real father. It was a shocking accusation. one that ripped open the carefully maintained illusion of control that Ronald had built. For the first time, he was being exposed. But with exposure came consequences. The indictment sent Ronald into a full-blown panic. He wasn't just angry, he was desperate. If convicted, he faced prison, disgrace, and the loss of his iron grip over his family. He refused to let that happen. Ronald became obsessed with avoiding arrest. Then, one night, Ronald made his decision. They were leaving. There would be no discussion, no arguments. He would uproot the family, flee New Mexico, and disappear before the law could catch up to him. And in that moment, the Simmons family's nightmare was only beginning. After the accusations, Ronald Gene Simmons disappeared into the woods of Arkansas. He moved to a place called Ward in Lonoke County and stayed there until the summer of 1983. But he wasn't just hiding, he was planning. The problems that had forced him to leave were only getting worse, and he needed a place where he could have full control. Eventually, he and Becky found it, a 13-acre piece of land in Dover. Ronald named it Mockingbird Hill. To outsiders, it was just a quiet rural home, but for his family, it was a prison. He quickly turned it into a fortress. He made his children build cinder block walls around the house. He put up barbed wire fencing around the property. No one could get in, but more importantly, no one could get out. Life inside was harsh. The house had no plumbing, so the children had to build outhouses. There was no TV, no phone, no escape. The children weren't allowed to have friends. They could only leave for school, and even then, Ronald followed the school bus in his car, watching them closely. He took small jobs to make money, first at a Veterans Administration office in Little Rock, then at a recruiting office. But he was struggling. He still owed money on a home in New Mexico, and his salary wasn't enough. He also kept losing jobs because he made unwanted advances toward female coworkers. Again and again, he was fired. By 1984, 2 of his children had left home. His son Bill married Renata and moved to Dallas County. His eldest son, Ronald Jr., married Wilma, and they had a daughter, Barbara, in San Antonio. But the one who affected Ronald the most was Sheila. She had always been his favorite, the one he wanted to keep close. But in Little Rock, she found freedom. She met Dennis McNulty at the Drawn School of Business, and they quickly became close. For the first time, she had someone to talk to about life at Mockingbird Hill, the rules, the punishments, the fear. When she told Ronald she was marrying Dennis, something changed in him. His love turned into hatred. In September 1984, Sheila and Dennis got married and moved to Camden, taking Sylvia, the child Ronald had claimed as his own, with them. Later, she had a son named Michael. This was the final betrayal. Ronald sent her a chilling letter. "I will see you in the pits of hell." After that, he shut himself away. He refused to work, refused to speak. He only left his room to use the restroom. The once powerful ruler of the house had become a shadow. The only people left at Mockingbird Hill were Becky and the 4 children still living under his rule. But he still wanted control over someone. He turned his attention to his second eldest daughter, Loretta. But Loretta wasn't like Sheila. She saw what he was and stayed away from him. She avoided him, refused to let him control her. The more she resisted, the angrier he became. His family was slipping away. His money was running out. He could barely hold a job. By 1985, he had 2 low-paying jobs in Russellville, one at a gas station and another at a trucking company. At work, his obsession with women continued. Kathy Kendrick was 24, married, and friendly. That didn't stop him. First, he sent notes, then flowers, then small gifts. He even started showing up at her doorstep. Kathy told him to stop. He didn't. While Ronald was fixated on Kathy, Becky was falling apart. She secretly wrote letters to her son Billy, describing how trapped she felt. She wrote about her fear, her loneliness, and her desperate wish to escape. But she didn't know how. If she tried to leave, she feared what Ronald might do. Let us read together one of the letters that Becky wrote to her son Bill, his wife Renata, and their son Trey.
"Dear Bill, Renata, and Trey, Loretta may be staying in town Friday night, so I'll have her mail this. I've been thinking of what you said, Bill, and I know you were right. I don't want to live the rest of my life with Dad, but I'm still trying to figure out how to start. What if I can't find a job for some time? You have to remember, I've never had a job since I've been married, or before that either. I now have to start somewhere. It would all be so much easier if it was just me, but I have 3 kids at home. Anyway, if you want to do any checking by telephone, go ahead and check, and we can talk about it when you come. I've decided if I borrow from Mum, I would have her send it all to you. I'm still very confused, but like I said, I do know I don't want to stay with Dad, but don't want him getting more than he deserves. Yet sometimes I feel like God is telling me to be more patient. Right now, I'll just say, do some checking, and then it will help make my decision. I would like for Loretta to move in with you after she turns 18. She wants to go to college and she can get a job too. I don't think San Antonio is the best place for her. Elgin and Wilma are back together, but they want to try it out and try to come get Barbara. I'm sure enjoying Barbara. She's a sweet, lovable, polite little girl. She's a good girl and we all love her and enjoy her so much. She always has us laughing. I'm so proud of Trey. The last time you came, Dad wanted to know why you didn't stay long enough to see him too. Now that Elgin and Wilma are back together, I wish they would move from San Antonio. Barbara needs both her parents. They've both been through so much. I hope it works out. I love them both. Wilma wrote me a letter telling me she loves Elgin very much, and she must. She went back to him. I'm sure she has been hurt deeply. I want to see all my children happy. I remember a lot of what you said, Bill. I am a prisoner here, and the kids too. I know when I get out, I might need help. Dad has me like a prisoner. The freedom might be hard for me to take. Yet I know it would be great having my children visit me anytime. Having a telephone, going shopping if I want, going to church. Every time I think of freedom, I want out as soon as possible. I don't want to put any burden on my children, and I think it's best while or before I get too old. I want out, but it's the beginning. Once I get a job in a place that I can handle, with the mental support of my children, I can do it. It was hard to talk in front of Ronald. He's been having it so hard, and his problems were deeply in my mind. I felt sorry for him. I was so afraid of what he might go back and do. You are lucky, Bill. You have a very good wife. She has led you the right way, and that is toward God. She's very pretty too. I've always thanked God for sending you a good wife. I'm thankful for Dennis too. Give my darling Trey a lot of hugs and kisses from me. I love you all very much. I will get bored if I take too long to write, so I hope I made sense in this letter. Hope Loretta came out this Friday or Saturday on her way home. Love you very much, Mom.
Becky's letter was heartbreaking. A desperate plea from a woman trapped in a life she couldn't escape. The Simmons family was now fracturing under the weight of his paranoia and rage. The cracks were widening, and as Ronald spiraled deeper into anger and despair, one thing became terrifyingly clear. This was only the beginning of something far worse. In October 1987, Becky started to seriously think about leaving Ronald. But with the holidays coming up, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, she decided to hold off on her plans. She wanted to give her family one last holiday together, even if it was just for appearances. On December 18th, Ronald quit his job, and the pressure finally became too much. Everything seemed out of his control, and he couldn't stand it any longer. That day, Ronald went to Walmart and bought a .22 caliber gun. To most, it seemed like an unbelievable choice, but to Ronald, it was the final step in his dark plan. Returning home, he was consumed by rage. He went into his son's room where Ronald Gene Jr. was sleeping, and without warning, started hitting him with a crowbar. Ronald Gene Jr. fought back, but his father was too strong. In the end, Ronald pulled out the gun and shot his son in the face 4 times. But the horror didn't stop there. Next, Ronald went after Becky. He attacked her with the crowbar, then shot her twice. Her body fell to the floor, lifeless. Then, he turned on his 3-year-old granddaughter, Barbara, and strangled her with his bare hands. With 3 bodies now lying lifeless on the floor, Ronald dragged them outside. He had his younger children dig a shallow grave weeks earlier, and now he used it to bury their bodies. But Ronald wasn't done. He waited for his younger children to come home. They were excited for Christmas break, unaware that their lives were about to be taken. As they walked through the door, full of excitement, Ronald called them over one by one. He told them he had a special present for them. But instead of presents, he gave them death. He strangled Loretta, Eddie, Marianne, and Rebecca one by one. For 4 long days, Ronald lived in the house, surrounded by the bodies of his wife, children, and grandchildren. On December 26th, Sheila and her husband Dennis, their kids, Billy, and his wife Renata, planned to come over to celebrate Christmas. but they had no idea they were walking into a house filled with death. When they arrived, excited for the holidays, Ronald waited in the house, holding his gun. As soon as they walked in, he opened fire. Sheila, Dennis, Billy, and Renata never had a chance. Ronald didn't stop there. When it came to his grandchildren, he strangled them all, one by one. Not a single person was spared. After the murders, Ronald moved the bodies of his family inside, covering them with coats to hide the horror.
We're talking about 14, 5 in the house that we found. I believe we've got 7 in the grave up here and 2 here in the cars.
The only bodies left outside were those of the 2 youngest grandchildren, Trey and Michael, both just 2 years old. Ronald wrapped them in plastic sheets and placed them in abandoned cars on the property.
It's right next door, just a couple houses down. And it was late before we got in bed. And I just laid there. I could see those kids' faces. It was scary.
Now it was too late for anyone to stop him. Later that same day, on December 26th, Ronald left his home, leaving behind the bodies of his family. He drove to a Sears store in Russellville. There, he picked up Christmas gifts he had ordered for his family, gifts that would never be given. As if everything was normal, he stopped at a bar for a drink, trying to act as though the terrible events he had just carried out hadn't happened. After a brief respite, he returned home. 2 days later, on Monday, December 28th, Ronald drove back into Russellville, still holding the .22 caliber gun he had purchased days earlier from Walmart. This time, his journey was far more sinister. His first stop was at the law firm of Peel, Eddy, and Gibbons. It was there that Ronald found Kathy Kendrick, the secretary he had once pursued, only to be rejected. With a chilling calm, he shot and killed her. Next, Ronald went to an oil company where he confronted Russell Taylor, the owner of the mini-mart where he had worked until his resignation on December 18th. He shot Russell, but Russell survived the attack.
And the door flew open and the man shot him just point blank in the face, and then he turned and I screamed, and he turned and he shot at me, and it just went just past my hair. I felt the heat from it, and I just dove and he took off.
However, another man working there, James Chaffin, was not so lucky. James was killed in the same attack. But Ronald wasn't done yet. He headed straight to the mini-mart where he had worked. And there, he shot 2 more people. Both victims managed to survive, but they would live with the scars of the attack for the rest of their lives. Ronald's last stop was the office of the Woodline Motor Freight Company, where he confronted his former supervisor. He shot her twice, but she survived, leaving Ronald's violence spreading across the town.
I said, when he looked at me with that gun and pointed that gun on me, he had this just horrid grin on his face. And he looked mad. He just looked mad, and like a mad dog would look at.
At this point, his rage seemed unstoppable. But then something unexpected happened. Ronald took one of his former coworkers hostage at gunpoint. He forced her to call the police, demanding their attention. When the officers finally arrived at the scene, what happened next stunned everyone. Ronald, with blood on his hands and a trail of destruction behind him, surrendered without resistance. He was arrested without a fight, an act that shocked those who had been following his rampage.
He's done nothing in his cell other than lie on the bunk with his face to the wall and just lie there.
And so, Ronald Gene Simmons, the man who had destroyed his own family and killed those in his path, was taken into custody. Ronald's murder spree on December 28th marked the brutal end to his rampage. By this point, he was fully aware that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Having killed his entire family and others he believed had wronged him, his twisted form of revenge had reached its sickening peak. After his arrest, Ronald remained silent, refusing to speak to investigators. But when asked about his family, he became visibly emotional.
When they would mention where his family was at, how we could contact his family, and this kind of thing, the investigator said the only thing then that he saw was his bottom lip would quiver.
This raised immediate red flags, prompting authorities to conduct a welfare check at the Simmons family home on Mockingbird Hill. When the police arrived, they were met with an unimaginable scene. The bodies of Billy, Renata, Sheila, Dennis, and their daughter Sylvia were found in the living room, their lives violently taken. The horror inside the house was only the beginning, and it soon became clear that Ronald's monstrous actions extended far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. Further investigation revealed that 9 other family members, including Becky, were still missing. An entire search team was mobilized, scouring the property for any signs of the missing individuals. What they discovered was beyond horrible.
One of the deputies, he was a lieutenant at the time, Dillard Bradley, found a spot there that had been, it was obvious it had been freshly dug. It had been covered up with some scrap iron. And he moved that and found that had been freshly dug. We cordoned that area off and began digging. There was some barbed wire and there were some rocks and things like that on it. And so we had to kind of sort through that, and of course we thought very possibly it was a grave because we knew there were family members missing. Once we started digging down, then we found the first, hate to call it rose, but I guess you'd call it rose. The whole grave was probably, I'm going to say probably, I'm sure, trying to go by memory now, but I'm going to say it was around 5 feet deep probably. And the bodies had been thrown in just on top of each other.
Despite his cold-blooded actions, Ronald had repeatedly stated that he did not want to plead insanity. He was adamant that he wanted the death penalty, seeking the swiftest possible end to his life. Nonetheless, a psychiatric evaluation was conducted, and it confirmed that Ronald was sane enough to stand trial.
I asked the judge to send him to the state hospital for a psychiatric examination, which the judge did, and the judge didn't set a bond.
Throughout the investigation, Ronald refused to speak, offering no explanation for his horrifying actions. He never revealed what had pushed him to the breaking point, nor how he had carried out the murders. On May 12, 1988, Ronald faced trial for the murders of Kathy Kendrick and James Chafin. He was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to death. The following year, on March 16, 1989, Ronald was once again sentenced to death, this time for the murders of his 14 family members. In both trials, Ronald waived his right to file any appeals, a decision that shocked many. He did this deliberately, seeking to expedite his execution. It became clear that he showed no remorse for his actions and fully embraced his fate.
Whatever happened at the house, and then it just sort of appeared like, well, you know, he's done all of this and he knew probably he would go to prison, and so he might as well just take care of any other issues that he had. And basically that's what he said when he was arrested, was he was through. I'm done.
On May 31st, 1990, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton signed Simmons's execution warrant, scheduling his execution for June 25th, 1990. This marked the fastest transition from sentencing to execution in U.S. history at the time, as Ronald had made sure there would be no delays in carrying out his death sentence.
The court ruled that outsiders have no right to block an execution if the condemned person wants to die without an appeal.
When June 25th finally arrived, Ronald faced his fate with cold resolve. His final words, spoken just before his execution, were brief and unapologetic. If you're shocked by this story, then the story of how Sherry and her 2 sons tragically lost their lives will leave you questioning everything. You can tap on the screen to watch, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.